What if I told you that nearly everything you believe about a balanced diet is built on a foundation of calculated fragility? Take a look at your dinner plate tonight. Most likely you are staring at one of the big three: wheat, corn, or rice. These three crops provide over half of the global caloric intake, yet they are notoriously weak, water-hungry, and genetically bottlenecked. We have been conditioned to rely on them, but have you ever stopped to ask why we ignored the one plant that actually thrives where others die? Imagine a crop so resilient it can burst through a concrete crack in a city sidewalk, yet so nutritious it offers more protein than a prime steak and more minerals than a garden of kale. For centuries, this botanical powerhouse was deliberately buried, stripped from our fields and our memories by those who prefer a dependent population. If you aren't growing this, you're betting your survival on a supply chain designed to fail. You are leaving your family's future in the hands of a system that prioritizes control over true food sovereignty. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the great agricultural deception. We are moving past the fragile dominance of industrial rice to rediscover the deep, ancient mystery of the true and powerful hidden resurrection grain. Rice is the golden child of the grocery store. It is cheap, abundant, and predictable. But behind that sterile white grain is a biological disaster waiting to happen. The world has been sold a myth that rice is the ultimate survival staple, yet it is perhaps the most vulnerable crop in human history. To grow a single kilogram of rice, you need up to 5,000 liters of water. In a world of shifting climates and drying aquifers, this is not a strategy for independence. It is a recipe for catastrophe. While we are told rice is a health food, the truth is that white rice is a nutritional ghost. It lacks the essential amino acids, particularly lysine, that your body needs to actually thrive. It is high-calorie but low-substance. Beyond the plate, the soil itself is paying the price. Modern industrial rice farming has turned fertile land into chemical-dependent dust bowls. Without a constant cycle of synthetic fertilizers and toxic pesticides, these crops would simply wither. This is the definition of thirsty, weak agriculture. Why then do we cling to it? Because rice has always been a crop of control. Throughout history, empires favored rice because it forced people to gather around centralized irrigation systems. If a government controls the water, they control the calorie. If you rely on a crop that requires massive infrastructure and global chemical chains, you are not a sovereign gardener. You are a tenant of the state. It is the ultimate tool of dependency, designed to keep populations looking toward a central authority for their next meal. Now, contrast this fragile, pampered grain with a drought-defiant warrior. Imagine a crop that requires no irrigation, rejects the need for chemicals, and builds the soil instead of stripping it bare. While the industrial complex pushes us toward a future of scarcity and expensive inputs, there is a hidden path leading back to a time when food was a weapon of freedom. We have been fed weakness for far too long, and it is time to look at the history they tried to erase to keep us small. By rejecting the thirsty, dependent systems of the past, we can finally begin to reclaim our autonomy and plant the seeds of a hidden legend. The name is Amaranth. It doesn't sound like a threat, but it was. For the Aztec Empire, it was more than food. It was the king of grains. They called it Huatli. It stood tall in the fields of Tenochtitlan, draped in deep, majestic crimson. These aren't just flowers. They are plumes of fire that look like they are bleeding into the earth. When you see a mature amaranth plant, you don't see a garden vegetable. You see an ancient monument to vitality. It was believed to grant supernatural strength to the warriors who consumed it. The Aztecs. This plant was the physical manifestation of life force. They would grind the seeds, mix them with honey, and shape them into idols of their gods. It was a bridge between the physical and the spiritual. But beyond the ritual, there was a biological genius to this plant that even modern science struggles to replicate. It is a C4 plant, meaning it processes sunlight and carbon dioxide with an efficiency that puts common wheat to shame. It grows with a ferocity that borders on the impossible. Here is the true magic. The seeds. They are so incredibly small that you could fit thousands in the palm of your hand. They look like mere specks of dust, easily hidden in a pocket or a fold of cloth, making them the ultimate tool for a people under siege. Yet, From a single tiny speck of life comes a giant that towers over a grown man. One individual plant is capable of producing over 100,000 seeds. Think about that math. That is not just a harvest. That is an explosion of life. It is the definition of abundance in a world where we are told to settle for scarcity. You could hide the future of an entire village's food supply in a small leather pouch and no one would even know it was there. It is the ultimate insurance policy against famine, a hidden weapon that requires no massive granaries to start. Why is this name not a household word? Why, when we talk about superfoods and survival grains, is amaranth often left out of the conversation? It isn't an accident of history. It isn't because the plant was difficult to grow or because it tasted bad. In fact, it was quite the opposite. The reason you haven't been told to fill your garden with these bleeding red plumes is far more sinister than simple forgetfulness. The silence surrounding this crop was bought with blood and enforced by the highest powers of the old world. To understand why this grain is missing from your pantry, we must look at the dark decree. When the Spanish ships touched the shores of the New World, they didn't just see gold. They saw a culture they couldn't control. At the heart of that culture was amaranth. The conquistadors realized that as long as the indigenous people had this grain, they were invincible. It wasn't just food. It was their identity. Hernán Cortés and his men declared war on a plant. They recognized that the Aztec warriors drew their physical and spiritual endurance from these red stalks. So they issued a decree that chilled the blood of the continent. Growing, possessing, or eating amaranth was made a capital offense. They didn't just kill you. They sought to humiliate the tradition entirely. People caught with the forbidden grain had their hands cut off. Fields were burned to the ground. The goal was total eradication. They wanted to replace a self-sufficient, spiritually grounded diet with European staples like wheat, crops that required the oversight of the new colonial lords to thrive. It wasn't just about religion. It was about autonomy. A person who can grow their own high-protein, drought-resistant food in the mountains or the jungles is a person who cannot be easily taxed, moved, or starved into submission. This wasn't just a 16th century tragedy. It was a prototype for the world we live in now. Today, the weapons have changed, but the objective remains the same. Instead of swords and decrees, we have patent laws and genetic modification. Modern agricultural giants hate amaranth because they cannot own it. You cannot patent an ancient, open-pollinated seed that grows like a weed and ignores their chemicals. They want you dependent on seeds that require their specific fertilizers and their specific herbicides. They want you trapped in a loop of debt and dependency. Growing amaranth today is more than just gardening. It is a quiet act of revolution. They didn't want you to have this because it makes you ungovernable. When you can harvest 100,000 seeds from a single plant that requires nothing from the industrial complex, you have broken their chains. You are no longer a consumer waiting for a permission slip to eat. You are a threat to the status of those who profit from your fragility. By reclaiming this buried history, you aren't just planting a crop. You are arming yourself with a biological legacy of defiance. This grain was suppressed because it provided a level of health and independence that the authorities simply could not allow. And as we look at the nutritional profile of this forgotten warrior, you will see exactly what they were so afraid of. They feared the power of a people who could finally feed themselves without asking for permission. We have spoken of the history and the blood on the leaves, but now we must look at the biological fuel within the seeds. If you look at a bowl of white rice, you are looking at nothing more than empty energy. It is a simple carbohydrate bomb that leaves your muscles starving for the actual building blocks of life. Rice fills your stomach, but amaranth builds your body. This is the fundamental distinction between merely surviving and truly thriving. Most modern grains have a fatal flaw that the industry tries to ignore. Wheat, corn, and rice are all notoriously low in an essential amino acid called lysine. Because of this missing link, the protein they provide is fundamentally incomplete. Your body simply cannot fully utilize it for cellular repair or muscle growth. Amaranth is a biological outlier in the plant kingdom. Contains a complete protein profile that rivals animal products. The quality of its protein is so high that scientists often compare it to the gold standard of milk or eggs. People are told they need a steak to get their iron and protein, yet amaranth often has more iron per serving than a piece of beef. It contains double the amount of calcium found in cow milk, making it a hidden weapon for bone density that your doctor likely never mentioned. Why is this missing from mainstream health advice? Because you cannot bottle this and sell it as an expensive supplement when it grows for free. For those living a high-stress or survival-based lifestyle, magnesium is the master mineral. It regulates over 300 biochemical reactions, including muscle recovery and sleep. Amaranth is absolutely loaded with it. While modern wheat has been stripped of its mineral content through decades of soil depletion, Amaranth pulls minerals from deep within the earth with its aggressive root system. It is a mineral sponge, concentrating the life force of the soil into a tiny, digestible package. The pharmaceutical and industrial food complexes do not want you to have a one-stop shop for nutrition. They want you buying fortified, processed junk and then buying the pills to fix the deficiencies that junk causes. Amaranth breaks that cycle of sickness. It provides the very things your body is screaming for in a form that is perfectly bioavailable. This is not just a grain. It is a nutritional superweapon that was kept from your arsenal for far too long. Now that you know the science of what is inside the seed, it is time to look at the miraculous reality of how it actually grows. It is a story of incredible resilience, extreme survival, and the absolute power of nature unleashed on an unsuspecting world. In a true survival situation, your most precious resource isn't your ammo or your fuel. It is your energy. If you are spending 10 hours a day laboring over a temperamental garden that dies the moment the sun gets too hot or the rain fails to fall, you are losing the battle. This is where the beauty of Amaranth truly shines. It is the ultimate crop for the lazy gardener and the strategic survivalist alike. While industrial rice requires you to build complex flood systems and wheat demands perfect, tilled soil, Amaranth asks for almost nothing. It is quite literally a superweed. In many parts of the world, massive agricultural corporations spend millions of dollars trying to kill it with toxic sprays, only for the plant to stand tall and laugh at their efforts. You do not need prime, expensive farmland to succeed here. Amaranth thrives in the kind of poor, compacted, or alkaline soil that would make a common tomato plant wither in a day. It is a drought-defiant warrior that requires a mere fraction of the water needed by traditional grains. If the rains stop and the heat waves roll in, your corn might fail and your rice will dry up, but your amaranth will simply keep reaching for the sky. It is biologically built for the harsh realities of a changing world. This is the definition of true empowerment. You are removing the backbreaking labor and the constant anxiety from your personal food security. And then there is the eternal nature of the crop. When you plant amaranth once, you are essentially planting it for life. Because a single stalk produces such a massive volume of seeds, it is a master of self-seeding. Even if you miss a few stalks during your harvest, the wind and the birds will do the work for you. Next spring, without you lifting a single finger or buying another packet of expensive seeds from a corporate supplier, a new generation of red plumes will emerge from the earth. It is a harvest once, eat forever system that guarantees your calories regardless of what happens to the global seed market. But don't make the mistake of thinking this plant is only about the grain at the end of the season. Its generosity starts much earlier than that. While the seeds are a nutritional powerhouse, the plant offers a secondary hidden treasure that most people walk past. Imagine walking through your garden in the middle of a scorching July heat wave. Your lettuce has long since bolted and turned bitter. Your spinach has shriveled into nothingness. Most gardeners at this point accept a summer gap in their leafy greens, but the amaranth grower is just getting started. This is the hidden bonus that almost no one mentions in the mainstream gardening world. Amaranth is not just a grain. It is one of the most productive leaf vegetables on the planet. Most people throw away the best part of the plant because they have been trained to see it only as a seed producer. This is a massive mistake. The leaves of the amaranth plant are essentially a super spinach. When you compare these greens to the limp, watery lettuce you find at the grocery store, the contrast is staggering. Store-bought greens are often little more than fiber and water, traveling thousands of miles and losing nutrients every hour they sit on a shelf. Amaranth leaves are a dense concentration of beta-carotene, vitamin C, and iron. They don't just survive the heat, they thrive in it. While other greens turn to mush in the sun, amaranth leaves stay tender and sweet. This creates a dual-purpose survival system that effectively doubles your food security per square foot of soil. Think about the strategic advantage here. In the early summer, you are harvesting baskets of nutrient-dense greens to fuel your body during the heavy labor of the growing season. Then, as the weather cools and the plant matures, it shifts its energy into producing those massive plumes of grain for your winter storage. You get two entirely different food groups from a single seed. It is the ultimate efficiency for any small-scale grower or survivalist. You are extracting the maximum possible value from every drop of water and every inch of dirt. Most people are blind to this second harvest, but for those who know the secret, it is the difference between a meager garden and a true homestead of abundance. But knowing what to grow is only the first small step. If you decide to step outside the industrial food maze, you have to be careful about where you get your starting material. The system is designed to sell you seeds that are biological dead ends. They want you buying hybridized versions that won't grow true to seed next year, forcing you back to the corporate counter every spring. To truly break free, you must seek out heritage, open-pollinated varieties of amaranth, the kind that have been passed down through generations of families who understood their value. These are the seeds that carry the raw, unfiltered power of the ancient world. However, there is a reason you might find it difficult to find these seeds at your local big-box garden center. There is a massive smear campaign currently underway. You will often hear amaranth referred to by a much uglier name, pigweed. To the massive chemical giants and the industrial farmers who use their products, amaranth is the ultimate enemy. Why? Because amaranth has developed a natural resistance to Roundup and other glyphosate-based herbicides. It is literally outsmarting the multi-billion-dollar chemical industry. In their world, it is a noxious weed that must be eradicated because it threatens the dominance of their patented corn and soy. They call it a plague, but for the independent homesteader, it is a miracle. The very plant the chemical giants are trying to kill is the one that will save your family. While they spend millions on more toxic poisons to wipe it out, you can quietly plant it in your back 40 and watch it thrive without a single drop of their chemicals. It is the ultimate irony of our modern age. Once you have secured your heritage seeds and planted your field of rebellion, the next challenge is simply learning how to begin. Bringing this ancient power into your kitchen is where the true liberation begins. Unlike rice or wheat, which require backbreaking labor or expensive machinery to hull and process, amaranth is refreshingly simple. There is no tough outer shell to fight through. You can simply thresh the dried plumes and collect the tiny pearls of life. This ease of use makes it the ultimate survival grain for the independent household. One of the most incredible ways to prepare it is also the simplest: popping it. When tossed into a hot, dry pan, the seeds explode into miniature white clouds, creating a nutty, crunchy snack that the Aztecs loved. You can also grind these seeds into a dense, protein-rich flour for survival breads and hearty pancakes that keep you full for hours. If you prefer a more traditional route, boil it like a porridge or use it as a direct substitute for rice to soak up stews and sauces. This grain represents a kitchen free from corporate interference and supply chain fragility. If you had a crop that couldn't be taxed or controlled, what's the first thing you would bake? By mastering these methods, you finally reclaim your own absolute food autonomy. The time for hesitation is over. We can all see the cracks forming in the global infrastructure. Empty shelves and rising prices are no longer a distant threat. They are our current reality. You need to secure your heritage amaranth seeds now, before the next supply chain snap makes them impossible to find. Do not wait for a permission slip from a system that profits from your hunger. Start your own food rebellion today. The grocery stores are thinning out. Your backyard shouldn't be. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever tried growing this ancient powerhouse? Or are you ready to plant your first seeds of defiance this season? Share your stories of rebel gardening and let's build a community that doesn't rely on a barcode for survival. Your journey to true independence begins with a single tiny seed and the courage to plant. You now hold the forbidden key. The red plumes of amaranth are more than just a crop. They are a legacy of endurance that no empire could bury. As you look across a field of crimson, remember that true power never comes from a store or a government. It comes from the earth and the courage to grow your own way. They tried to erase the seed, but you are the living proof that freedom is always truly immortal.